The warning reached them on an open channel, unencrypted and unadorned, like a man knocking once on a door he already knew would be broken. This is Earth. No fanfare. No martial anthem. No layered chorus of artificial voices meant to sound impressive. Just one human voice, male, a little rough around the edges, carrying the faint exhaustion of someone who had delivered bad news too many times. You are entering a restricted system. Your fleet has crossed the final exclusion boundary. Turn around. This is your last warning. High Overlord Zertal of the Threxian Dominion let the translation finish before responding, not because he needed the time, but because he enjoyed the silence. Around him, the command chamber pulsed with soft crimson light, walls alive with organic circuitry and living glyphs that recorded every conquest, every species reduced to footnotes. His officers shifted and clicked with restrained amusement. That, Zertal said at last, was it? A ripple of contempt spread through the chamber. The Threxians were not unfamiliar with defiance. Every doomed civilization tried it. Usually louder. Usually angrier. Usually begging by the end. Identify yourself. Zertal transmitted, his voice resonant and layered with the harmonics of authority. You speak to the Dominion of Threx. Your species stands in the shadow of extinction. The human voice returned almost immediately. We know who you are. That, more than anything else, irritated him. You have consumed 17 systems in this spiral arm alone. The human continued. You sterilize planets that resist, enslave those that kneel, and erase the rest from your historical records. We've studied you for decades. Zertal's eyes narrowed. Few species survived long enough to study anything. And yet, the human said, you still came. Yes, Zertal replied. Because knowledge does not equal power. You are a single-system species. Divided. Primitive. Your transmissions alone reveal internal conflict, resource mismanagement, ideological fractures. You are not a threat. There was a pause. A long one. Then the human spoke again, quieter now. Almost conversational. That's what the others said. Zertal dismissed the channel with a flick of his claw. Advance the fleet. Full incursion formation. Target their orbital infrastructure first. I want their sky to fall before their cities burn. Outside the flagship, the Threxian armada moved. It was a sight that had ended civilizations. Thousands of vessels slid forward in perfect biological synchronization, warhives kilometers long, brood carriers bristling with weapon spines, planet breakers whose cores glowed with captive singularities. The fleet eclipsed starlight as it advanced, a living shadow rolling toward the third planet of the system. Earth. Human sensors tracked every movement. They made no attempt to hide that fact. In an underground command facility buried beneath layers of rock, steel, and history, Admiral Marcus Hale watched the display in silence. He was past 60, his hair gone gray decades earlier, his face carved by wars that never made the history books. Around him, younger officers waited for orders that did not come. Range? Hale asked calmly. Enemy fleet has crossed the heliopause, a lieutenant replied. Estimated time to weapons range, 8 minutes. Hale nodded. Any response from diplomatic channels? No, sir. Of course not. Diplomacy ended when warnings were ignored. He activated the channel one final time. This is Earth, Hale said. You are making a mistake. The Threxian response came instantly, overflowing with contempt. There are no mistakes, Zertal declared. Only victories and lessons. You will serve as both. Hale ended the transmission. He exhaled slowly. Phase 1, he said. No alarms blared. No dramatic countdowns echoed through the chamber. Just a quiet cascade of confirmations as systems older than most of the people in the room came online. Out near the edge of the system, space shuddered. At first, Threxian sensors reported nothing unusual. Then one warhive vanished. Not exploded. Not fragmented. Gone. Its mass signature dropped to 0 in less than a microsecond. What was that? Zertal snapped. Before the question could be answered, another ship disappeared. Then another. And another. Panic rippled through the fleet. Formations broke as captains attempted evasive maneuvers that made no tactical sense because nothing they understood was attacking them. High Overlord, a tactician said, mandibles trembling. Space-time distortion detected. Gravitational constants are fluctuating locally. That is impossible, Zertal hissed. You cannot alter constants. On the human side, a weapons officer allowed himself a thin smile. We're not altering them, he muttered. We're reminding them they were never rules. Just averages. Invisible to the naked eye, human installations scattered throughout the system activated, ancient satellites once labeled as debris, mining platforms written off as obsolete, research stations officially decommissioned centuries earlier. Together, they formed a lattice no alien intelligence had ever bothered to map. The first Threxian counterattack came too late. Plasma lances tore through empty space, striking nothing but echoes of where ships used to be. Faster-than-light drives refused to engage, locked by localized distortions that made escape mathematically impossible. Zertal felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Fear. This is not a battle, he growled. This is a trap. On Earth, Hale watched the fleet disintegrate in silent increments. They always think we're bluffing, he said softly. That's the problem with predators. They don't understand warnings. Another Threxian vessel vanished. Then 10 more. And still, humanity did not fire a single visible shot. The human voice returned to the open channel, steady as ever. You were told to turn around. The stars themselves seemed to agree. The Threxian fleet did not retreat. That, more than any tactical failure, sealed their fate. High Overlord Zertal slammed his claws into the living console as another cluster of warhives vanished from existence, their loss registering as a sudden, nauseating absence on every sensor array. There were no debris fields. No radiation spikes. Just nothing. As if reality itself had decided those ships were in error and corrected it. Reform the line! Zertal roared. Disperse! Random vectors! Do not allow them to! His command died as 3 escort vessels winked out directly in front of the flagship, close enough that the shock of their disappearance rippled through Threxian hull plating like a struck nerve. High Overlord! A navigation officer chittered in rising panic. Local space refuses to stabilize. Every core solution collapses into paradox. We cannot predict. Then stop predicting, Zertal snapped. Attack! The order rippled through the fleet, triggering instinctive obedience. Threxian ships did what they had always done when confused or threatened. They unleashed hell. Plasma lances carved incandescent scars through the void. Graviton torpedoes bloomed like dying stars. Enough firepower to scour a planet clean screamed toward the inner system. On Earth, alarms finally sounded. Not from fear, but from protocol. Enemy weapons inbound. An analyst called out. Multiple vectors. Yield estimates in the exciton range. Admiral Marcus Hale didn't flinch. Let them shoot, he said. The first wave of Threxian fire struck what appeared to be a loose ring of abandoned infrastructure. Rusted satellites, fractured asteroids, decommissioned mining rigs left over from humanity's early expansion. The alien gunners adjusted, confident they had found the weak point. Then the shots slowed. Not stopped. Slowed. Plasma streams bent, stretching like molten glass. Graviton torpedoes decelerated until their own containment fields collapsed, dispersing harmlessly into nothing. Impact failure across all batteries, a Threxian weapons master whispered. Their defenses are eating our momentum. Hale allowed himself a humorless smile. Newton would have loved this, he muttered. We finally figured out how to charge interest on force. The debris field wasn't debris at all. It was a kinetic sink, a distributed gravity well tuned to siphon energy, bleed velocity, and convert incoming attacks into raw power. That power flowed through hidden conduits, lighting up systems across the solar defense grid like a heartbeat. "Grid is charging faster than projections," a lieutenant said, awe creeping into his voice. "They're fueling us." "Good," Hale replied. "Bring up the Ghost fleet." At the edge of Threxian sensor range, shapes began to emerge. Human ships. Not the sleek, pristine vessels of parade holidays, but ugly, scarred things that looked like they'd been welded together in backwater docks and forgotten shipyards. Hulls bore mismatched plating. Engines burned with old, inefficient fire. Some still carried faded insignias from wars humanity pretended never happened. "Identify those vessels," Zertal demanded. The answer unsettled him. "They are broadcasting civilian transponder codes," the tactician said. "Freight. Salvage. Independent contractors. Civilian ships, advancing into a slaughter." Zertal felt a surge of contempt strong enough to smother his fear. So this is their desperation. Throwing unarmed masses at us. The human ships accelerated. And then they opened fire. Kinetic slugs, simple, brutal, relativistic, punched through Threxian shields that had been calibrated to absorb exotic energy weapons, not raw mass traveling at obscene fractions of light speed. One slug cored a brood carrier end to end, turning its interior into a red mist before exiting and shattering a second vessel behind it. "What kind of weapons are those?" Zertal hissed. "Primitive." A human privateer captain laughed over open channel. "That's why you didn't plan for him." Boarding alarms began to scream across the Threxian fleet as pods slammed into hulls, burrowing through organic armor with shaped charges and old-fashioned hatred. Human soldiers spilled out in powered exocets scuffed by use, their movements efficient, practiced, utterly without ceremony. Inside one breached warhive, a Threxian commander raised his forelimbs in ritual surrender. The human sergeant leading the assault tilted his helmeted head. "Funny thing about rituals," he said, planting an explosive on the hive core. "They only work if both sides believe in them." The blast ripped the warhive apart from the inside. Back in the command center, Hale watched casualty estimates climb, not human ones. "Enemy fleet effectiveness down 40%, an officer reported. "Command cohesion collapsing." Hale nodded slowly. "They still think this is a battle," he said. "They haven't realized yet." "Realized what, sir?" "That this is a lesson." As if on cue, the Threxian flagship shuddered as a nearby planet breaker vanished, space folding inward where it had been. Zertal stared at the growing void, his certainty finally cracking. "They are not defending," he whispered. "No," Hale replied aloud, though Zertal could not hear him. "We're correcting an assumption." And the stars, cold and indifferent, watched as the Threxian Dominion began to understand what it meant to ignore Earth's final warning. Zertal's fury had begun to solidify into something darker. Fear, yes, but also disbelief. How could a species he had dismissed as primitive, a species that barely spanned one solar system, do this? How could they erase ships, bend reality, and turn every old satellite, asteroid, and scrap of debris into a weapon? "Activate the Sun Eater," he barked, claws slamming the living console. "Do it now! If they want to play with physics, we will play with the stars themselves." A groan of anticipation. More than half the surviving fleet had never seen the Sun Eater in action. Bioengineered from a collapsed star's core, the weapon was a monstrous hybrid of biology and technology, capable of destabilizing a sun in mere hours. It had ended civilizations before. It would end Earth. In the underground chambers of the solar defense grid, Hale's eyes flickered across the monitors. A localized spike in gravitational energy, the Sun Eater awakening. The humans had anticipated it. "Admiral," a young officer said, voice trembling. "It's en route. At current acceleration, it will reach the sun in 12 hours. If it destabilizes Sol..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Hale leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "Phase 3, he said. An almost imperceptible nod rippled through the room. The humans had built it, tested it, and hidden it for a single scenario: extinction-level alien aggression. No one outside a handful of retired scientists had ever known it existed. At the edge of the system, the Sun-Eater accelerated, oblivious to the invisible net that awaited. And then time itself started to fight it. A localized temporal inversion field snapped into place. Space around the Sun-Eater shimmered like mercury in sunlight. Time flowed backward, forward, then backward again. The monstrous construct aged and unaged in milliseconds, its cells collapsing into dust, then regrowing, then collapsing again. It screamed, a sound that no biological creature could perceive, until its mass finally unraveled completely. Zertal's mandibles clicked violently in disbelief. Impossible! Reality is immutable! No, Hale said, voice calm, almost weary. You're just not familiar with the rules we play by. The rest of the Threxian fleet was barely holding together. Less than 10% of vessels remained functional. Those that survived were drifting, weaponless, engines offline. Panic had replaced discipline. Rituals, prayers, and orders, all meaningless. Then a transmission reached Zertal's console. One he had not expected. It wasn't from a general or a politician. It was civilian. My name is Elena Ruiz, a calm, middle-aged human woman said. Her voice carried more authority than any Threxian lord could muster. You killed my husband when your scouts burned our colony at Vega. My son died in the evacuation. And you thought Earth would beg, plead, or die quietly. Zertal froze. The fleet shuddered. Do you intend to attack us now? He hissed. No, she replied. We're letting you go. Confusion, disbelief, and fury warred in Zertal's mind. So, you allow us to survive? He stammered. Not for mercy, she said. For the lesson. You will tell your Dominion what happens when they ignore a human warning. You will speak our name. You will teach them caution. Because we do not forgive. But we are patient. Hale watched the transmission feed silently. Sometimes, he said quietly to no one, the most terrifying weapon is restraint. The surviving Threxian commanders realized the same thing all at once. They had underestimated the humans, just as every species before them had. Their fleets, their plans, their doctrines, all meaningless in the face of patience, cunning, and unflinching resolve. And for the first time, Zertal understood something no Threxian had ever accepted, a species that warned once, meant every word. Humanity had chosen its moment. And that moment had arrived. The galaxy, for once, fell silent to watch. The Threxian dominion did not recover. Within a decade, their once mighty fleets were scattered and broken, their colonies abandoned, and their leaders whispered in fear of a species that could erase 1,000 warships in seconds and bend time itself. Word of Earth spread faster than the speed of light through interstellar networks. Tales of humans who weaponized stars, soldiers who boarded alien war hives with nothing but rifles and explosives, and civilians who could command fleets with calm voices became legend. On Earth, life returned to a quiet rhythm. Monuments were raised, not for victory, but for restraint. For the people who had died building the weapons no one ever hoped to use, and for those who had survived to ensure their homeworld endured. Admiral Marcus Hale retired in silence, walking through gardens he had planted decades earlier, the soil heavy under his boots. He had no desire for parades or praise. War, he had learned, was not measured in glory, but in survival, and sometimes mercy. Elena Rees returned to her own home, tending her garden while satellites above kept watch over a solar system that had learned how deadly patience could be. She thought of her husband, her son, and the billions who had suffered from alien greed, and she allowed herself a thin smile. Humanity had not sought revenge in the traditional sense. They had taught a lesson so absolute that it could never be forgotten. The privateer captains, those scarred and unpredictable human veterans who had flown into the Threxian fleet like ghosts, vanished back into the darkness between stars. They waited for the next impossible job, the next call when patience and precision could become instruments of survival. Across the galaxy, alien empires spoke Earth's name in both fear and reverence. They recounted the fleets that had vanished, the time-warped Sun-Eater, the civilians who had chosen to spare lives rather than destroy for vengeance. And they understood, finally, what every species that had come before should have: humans do not bluff. Because humans had warned them once. And when humans gave a final warning, they meant it. No species had ever challenged Earth and lived to tell the tale. Not because humans were invincible. Not because they were the strongest. But because they had learned, through war and survival and patience, that the true power of a species is knowing when to act, how to strike, and when to show mercy. The stars themselves seemed quieter after that. Perhaps out of respect, or perhaps because they had seen the truth: a species that defends its home with intelligence, brutality, and unwavering resolve is more terrifying than any empire, more unbreakable than any weapon, and more unpredictable than the universe itself. And Earth remained unyielding, a silent sentinel in the void, waiting for the next threat, always ready, and never, ever bluffing.